It's the end of the 50s.
Any girl can learn how to use a switchboard, but it isn't any girl who's good enough to be trained to GPO standard.
But for the girls on Derby's telephone exchange...
Hello, you don't know me, but I think my husband is having an affair with your next-door neighbour.
Life is about to begin.
You just need to make love to the audience. Yes.
I'll teach you.
Don't talk, Jim.
The girls you've all been dreaming about.
The Hello Girls, Thursday the 5th of September on BBC1.
Well, Bill Clinton takes the stand at this year's Democratic Party convention in Chicago, and there's live coverage of the proceedings in 20 minutes. A different kind of political animal before that on BBC Wales on 1, the vanishing partridge.
Areas of rolling hills, cereal fields crisscrossed with hedges. This is the favourite home of the grey partridge. It's a game bird, popular with those who go shooting, and is sometimes called the grouse of farmland. But there is more to the grey partridge than that. Like much of our wildlife, it has disappeared from many places where it used to be common, even though gamekeepers work hard to look after it. Why has the grey partridge disappeared? The South Downs near Worthing in Sussex are a good place to find the answers. Not long ago, these chalk hills were covered with grassland. But since World War II, they've been ploughed up. Modern farming methods are used, and the hedges and rough corners of fields have given way to huge fields of wheat and barley, a drastic change. Perhaps this is one reason for the disappearance of the grey partridge. But is it? "18 square miles of these downs were chosen as an area in which to study grey partridges, to try and find out just why they've vanished from so many places. Dick Potts of the Game Conservancy was put in charge of this project. His most important job has been to map where the partridges are in spring and autumn each year. This is a task for the early morning or evening, because that is when partridges are at their most active. They behave very differently from French partridges, which were brought in from France some 300 years ago. The French partridge is doing reasonably well. It is our grey partridge that has declined in recent years. During the winter, the male and female birds form into pairs, and in early spring they choose their nesting sites. Once they've made their choice, they don't stray very far from it. So each spring, Dick and his team are able to produce a distribution map like this, showing exactly where the partridge pairs are. The yellow dots indicate the territory of each pair. A typical territory includes somewhere in which to find food in winter, a sheltered spot for a nest, and a cereal field like this where chicks may feed. From March to April, the male courts the female and mating takes place. The hen lays 15 or 16 eggs. That is more than any other bird in Britain. The hen does all the sitting on the eggs, or incubation as it's called. But the cock is not far away, standing guard. Twice each day, usually each morning and each evening, she will leave the nest to feed, when the cock calls that all is clear. Often she covers the eggs before leaving them, but sometimes she's a little lazy. She makes the most of her short break away from the nest, feeding quickly to make up for lost time. Hurriedly, she devours grass and corn. She must get back to the nest before predators get there. sometimes too late. Not only eggs are taken. In Sussex, 15 of every 100 hen partridges are killed on the nest by foxes, cats and stoats. This is because there are fewer hedges than there used to be to provide shelter and cover for the nest. Each year, Dick Potts finds several nests and checks the number of eggs. This female is unusually tame. Sometimes a stranger's egg is found, that of a pheasant. Pheasants quite often lay their eggs in partridges' nests, and that can be rather a nuisance, as we shall see later. But another reason why there are fewer partridges is this. Year after year, our hedgerows are being torn up. They get in the way of modern farm machinery. But as hedges disappear, more partridges are forced to nest in the open, in full view of predators and exposed to the weather, hot or cold. And sometimes it gets very hot in an open cornfield. For 24 days, the female sits on the eggs. And as the time for hatching gets closer, she spends less and less time feeding, but more time fussing over her precious clutch of eggs. Perhaps turning the eggs helps all of them to hatch at the same time. It's very important that all the family are able to leave the nest together, as the young will need frequent brooding. When they first hatch, the chicks are wet. The hen will keep her own feathers clean and waterproofed with oil from the preen gland near her tail. This is the one time when the cockbird comes to have a look. The sound of the hens clucking and the cheeping of the chicks stimulates him to brood them. From now on, they will be a close family party, with both parent birds playing an equal part in looking after the chicks. The chicks are dry a few hours after hatching and are able to feed themselves at 1 day old. Dick does not make a habit of disturbing them at this time. He's just pleased to see that this family are safely hatched. Often as many as 14 of the eggs hatch successfully. You can tell successful nests by the way the shells are neatly chipped in half and one half stacked inside the other. But what is this? Under one of the partridge's wings is a pheasant chick, much larger than the young partridges. We saw earlier how pheasants sometimes choose to lay in a partridge nest. Partridges are perfectly capable of looking after a young pheasant or two, but the problem is that if the pheasants hatch first, the partridges will go off with these chicks and abandon their own eggs. This is certainly a problem to partridges in those parts of the country where many pheasants are reared. And now we're coming to the vital part of the story. Dick's work has shown that for the first 3 weeks of their life, young partridge chicks do not feed much on vegetation. 3/4 of their food must be obtained from animal matter rich in protein. Greenflies, spiders, beetles and so on, but in particular the caterpillar of the cereal leaf sawfly. Given the right conditions, these caterpillars are found in large numbers in cereal fields, just at the very time that the chicks need them most. The trouble is that today the right conditions do not often exist. These caterpillars do no harm to the crops, and some insects, like ladybirds for example, which eat greenfly, definitely do a lot of good. An important part of the work is finding out what insects are present in the cereal fields of the study area. For this, Dick uses a special vacuum insect net that works like a giant hoover, sucking up insects from the crop. Unfortunately, it also picks up soil and leaves, and so the insects have to be sorted out under a microscope. The numbers of different insects vary with the use made of insecticide sprays, and in recent years the spraying of cereal fields has increased enormously in an attempt to kill aphids. But one side effect of this is shown when a pooter is used to collect individual insects. These ladybirds were destroyed by the insecticide itself, but in other fields many died of starvation when the aphids were killed by crop sprays. If these sprays had been applied earlier in the season, they might also have killed many partridge chicks. Fortunately, all is not as bad as it may seem. Some farmers are using methods that are very good for partridges. Here, for instance, this spring wheat has been undersown with a grass clover lay. After harvest, the ground will not be ploughed, and the grass will be left there for grazing. Without ploughing to disturb them, the sawfly chrysalis survive well, and when the adults emerge in May, they can spread into the surrounding cereal fields. It's very important that Dick should relate his knowledge of insects and the effects of spraying to the yield that is harvested by the farmer. Farmers who leave hedgerows and strips of natural vegetation at field edges do much more than help partridges. This is also good for other birds like pheasants and corn buntings. It is not only insecticides that affect the food of partridge chicks. There are other sprays too. Herbicides destroy the natural weeds on which many insects live, and this effect, combined with less undersowing, results in large expanses of unsuitable habitat. Partridge chicks hatched into an area like this are unlikely to starve to death, but they will be in poor condition, and so less likely to stand up to the effects of bad weather, disease, or attacks from predators. Although stoats feed mainly on rabbits, in some places game birds may make up as much as 20% of their food. Dick's team have been studying stoats and weasels for some years now. They're brought in by gamekeepers to provide information on their age, sex, and so on, but in particular their stomach contents are examined for the remains of partridge chicks. Gamekeepers undoubtedly have a very significant effect on predators, and therefore on partridge numbers, especially their nesting success. Recent work shows that in normal years, it is only on well-keepered estates that the predators are sufficiently controlled to allow partridges to produce enough young birds to make organized shooting possible. Partridges are very active dust bathers, although the purpose of this is not at all clear. There's little doubt that the dust helps to discourage and dislodge fleas and feather lice. But why partridges do it so much, and why they rarely, if ever, bathe in water, nobody really seems to know. These young have already been flying for several weeks. They grow fast, so that by the end of August they're almost as big as the adults. It is a time of ease and plenty, and yet for some, it's the time of greatest danger. Horrifying though shooting may seem to some people, and disastrous though it is to many individual partridges, surprisingly it does not have a significant effect on the numbers that are left to breed the following year. Even though shooting may kill 30% of the birds in the autumn, there's a much more important factor to come: dispersal in winter. Squabbles over territory at the time when pairs are being formed in winter is probably the main reason for leaving the area. So regardless of shooting, the numbers in the area remain the same. Space, not shooting, is the important factor. Surprisingly, snow is not much of a problem. Bad weather is much more important a few months later, when it reduces the number of insects about and chills the chicks. Each autumn, as Dick makes his final count, he discovers that partridge numbers vary enormously from farm to farm. Food for the chicks is obviously of the utmost importance. But if there's too little nesting cover, too much nest predation or cold, wet weather when the eggs hatch, there will be fewer chicks needing the food in the first place. With agricultural methods changing all the time, Dick discovers a few more pieces for the partridge puzzle each year. And each piece is a most valuable reminder of what we're doing to partridges and to other wildlife that share our farmland. Partridges may never again be as plentiful as they were at the end of the last century. But the more we understand them and how they depend on farmland, the more we can be sure of their survival.
Once, this premature baby would probably have died. One doctor changed that. Once, people with TB were forced to live in sanatoriums.
I really did miss my wife.
One doctor changed that. Once, children with arthritis were put to bed for years on end. One doctor changed that.
I bully everyone, yes, I accept that.
6 extraordinary doctors, 6 discoveries that changed the face of medicine. Pioneers. A new series. Monday 9:30, BBC 2.
Well, this is BBC Wales on 1 at the Democratic Convention with Gavin Esler and Charles Wheeler.